Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Paola, and today I have a really awesome and very special guest. Jasmine, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about a Rovers story?
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you to talk about A Rover Story, which is my new middle grade novel. And so, Rover Story is about resilience. You see her on the cover, who's a Mars rover. And we follow him from his creation in the NASA lab all the way to Mars, to his kind of dangerous mission to Mars. But the thing you should know about resilience is early on in his creation, he starts to feel things and he worries that that makes him a bad robot or bad rover because the other robots that he's kind of interacting with in the lab kind of caution him against having what they call kind of human feelings. And so the book is sort of this exploration of resilience, sort of figuring out who he is, while wanting to do a good job, and also explores his relationship with the other robots in the NASA lab as well as the other NASA scientists. I kind of think of it as like Charlotte's Web, but with robots, or the one and only Ivan, but with robots, is how you could describe it.
Nice. I love that premise. It sounds so interesting. It reads like a picture book of sorts because even though there's like no illustrations, we have like the very little like short form flash fictiony kind of. And I think it's really interesting to have that format from the perspective of a robot. So, what was challenging about writing from a rover's perspective?
Yeah, I think the most challenging thing for me is I'm a really emotive writer, right? So I'm always interested in feelings. So of course my robot does have feelings. That's a big part of the book. But how to describe those feelings? Because for so long I've had human characters, right? And so I would rely a lot on like taste metaphors or even just like body physiology that like we all know what happens when we see our crush, right? The way our heart feels, our stomach feels, and I would rely on those things to describe it. But for a rover, like I can't say his heart raced when he's scared. How can I? So I had to like take these feelings that I know as a human being and kind of look at them from this different angle and distill them down into, well, what does it really mean to be scared? What does it really mean to love someone? What does it mean to be a friend? And so that was kind of the challenges that present itself, like figuring out this whole different voice and description for the robot, and then also how I could have him have this relationship with the other robots, which again, like kind of harkened me back to Charlotte's Web, how all the animals talk to one another and have relationships that the humans aren't aware of. But how could I do that? And how could I do that in a way that felt like believable and fun for the reader?
I love it. I love the way that you're describing it as well. It's just so fun to see writers' perspective on how they got to the place they needed to be to write from, and it's like such an interesting perspective. Like I rarely see it, and that's also why I say that it's kind of like a picture book. And this book is full of STEM things, NASA, all of that.
Yes.
So what was the research process like?
Yeah, so the I did a lot of research. I was constantly on the NASA website. I For my young readers in the back of the book, there's an author's note and there's like a list of resources. And one of the things that I think will be so cool is after they finish the book, they can go on NASA's website and there's so much stuff about the rovers and the rover program. You can like look at, 3D models of the rovers. And so I was doing all of that and figuring out kind of what was my fictional rover is named Resilience, but the new rover who's on Mars is named Perseverance. And I really kind of modeled Resilience off of Perseverance. So they kind of look the same. They have the same number of wheels, same number of cameras, all that kind of stuff. And then I also read this really long, kind of almost memoir by the head engineer who worked on the rover Curiosity, because I wanted to understand like what it's actually like to be in that NASA lab where the rovers are being created, and what do the scientists feel towards the rovers. And so that was a good like glimpse into being able to kind of detail those relationships.
Nice. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, no, it was such a fun book to work on, which is always kind of how it is about writing, right? That you're like chasing your curiosity. So if like you're into it enough, hopefully then you can make readers feel excited about it.
Definitely. If you were sent on a mission with Res, How do you think you two would interact?
I think that we would be a funny team because I think we're both like slightly anxious. Like, so it's my first non-human narrator, right? And so, like, I think a lot of the markers that lots of times I write protagonists who are, Arab American like me or Muslim American like me, and so readers automatically like associate a part of me with those characters. But in lots of ways, I'm very much like Resilience, and that he's like a little bit anxious, he's a little bit hesitant. And so I worry that we'd be a little bit overthinking. Like we definitely need Fly, who's the helicopter drone character. He's on the cover here, character to kind of push us along, motivate us, like give us some pep talks. And then Guardian, who's the satellite in the sky, who in the book gives Resilience a lot of his instruction. I think we'd also kind of rely a lot on Guardian. But I think we'd get along because I think we're kind of like similar personality types, but I'm not sure like how effective we would be.
I mean, it's a tough mission, and I remember telling my dad once, like, I wonder what it's like to be on the moon. And he was like, absolutely not, like, not me. So I feel like that's interesting to see as well. That, like, I don't want to be an astronaut, but this is
Yeah,
great research. This is a fun book I wrote.
that's
So this next one is a game. This is the fill in the blanks. So the first book I loved was
I know I've already mentioned it, but it's Charlotte's Web. So
Oh.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The first book I bought with my own money was
So I love this question, and I've been thinking about it for a while because I was so lucky that I grew up in a home where my parents did buy me books, always took me to the library, did give me money for this classic book fair. So I think if we're not counting like money that was given to me to buy books, the first money that I spent on my own money would have been when I was in high school and I had my first job. I remember I bought the collected works of Sylvia Plath from my indie
Ooh.
bookstore in Cincinnati.
My first book idea was
So in first grade, we did this project called Author's Night. And so I think it's the book that I wrote for Author's Night, which was about twins that have psychic powers and like control thunderstorms. But also, in that book, when I look at it, there's a lot of like stuff in there about becoming an American or being an American citizen because it's the time in my life that my dad was becoming a naturalized citizen in the United States. So I think it's really interesting how early on in my writing, I was already using it as a way to like wonder about identity and belonging, even when it was like about twins that had psychic powers and went to school for the first time. It had a lot of plots going on.
No, I love that. And I think that's another great thing about writers starting from such a young age.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, no, and kids are the very best. They're so smart. And like yesterday, I was getting to do my first school visits I've ever done for Rovers Story. And the kids had just the best questions and ideas. And you just see that they're so ready to be challenged in the best ways by the books they read. They bring it with their imagination and their intellect and the way they like, they're just the best readers. I feel so, so lucky to write for young people.
The song that reminds me the most of my book is
So I think this is probably Chinese Satellite by Phoebe Bridgers, just because when I first started drafting the book, and it's funny because it's like a really emo indie song that doesn't like match the book at all. Now I would say it's like the Star Wars theme song, probably reminds me of my book. But like early on, I remember like trying to find space songs, and I found that song, and so I would like do that thing where when you're drafting, you put like a song on repeat because it's like you want noise in the background, but you need to know the song well enough that it's not going to be distracting. And I used that song.
nice. That's a good song though. So
Yeah.
if you were a book, what section of the bookstore would you live in?
I'd probably be like a lyrical picture book because I think I sit on that intersection between like poetry and fiction. And so for me, that's picture books.
And finally, what do you hope readers take away from Ressa's story?
I feel like we've talked a lot about how this is like very different from any book that I've ever written before because it's like a non-human narrator and it's a little bit more of like a fun adventure. But at its heart, it's still a book about what does it mean to leave home, right? Which is something I think I'm always going to be writing about as the daughter of an immigrant. And it's about what does it mean to belong somewhere. And so, what I hope that kids take away from the book is that they do belong and that anywhere that they call home is lucky for to have them. And also that there are no bad feelings. Like all the feelings that they feel are valid. I think Rez worries a lot about his feelings, feeling the wrong thing, and this idea that it's okay to feel anxious sometimes. It's okay to feel sad sometimes because I think that makes us capable then of feeling the full spectrum of emotion. So those would be the things I would want them to take away, that they're brave even when they're scared, and they're more brave in some ways because they feel scared sometimes.
I love that. That's a very sweet message. And what you said about emotions, I really, really feel it. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really glad that we got to sit down. I think a Rover story is fascinating as a premise, and I can't wait for more readers to get it. And I hope it has a long shelf life. And yeah, people at home, don't forget to check the description below for buy links to a Rovers Story and for a link to Jasmine's website. And yeah, we will hopefully see you in another one. Bye.
Awesome. Bye. Thank you.